So I love comments like this because it grants me what I call a teachable moment for y'all. Now, the United States Constitution does address the issue of printing money. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, and it grants Congress the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and fix the standard weights and measures of the coin. This clause gives Congress the authority to create and regulate national currency, which includes printing money. But it doesn't expressly say that the currency needs to be pegged to any sort of metal, let alone gold. The United States started using metallic standard for pegging its currency with the Coinage Act of 1792, which established a bimetallic standard, meaning both gold and silver could be used as the basis for U.S. currency. This was not a constitutional amendment, though. It was just a standard act, and it came well after the ratification of the Constitution, which took place in 1788, so 4 years after. Now, the gold standard, as you guys know it, became more prominent in the U.S. after the passage of the Gold Standard Act in 1900. This was 112 years after the Constitution was ratified. This act effectively adopted the gold standard as the primary basis for U.S. currency, fixing the value of the U.S. dollar to a specific weight of gold, at the time 1.5 grams of gold per dollar. Now, this was called a de jure gold standard, which means that it wasn't a true gold standard even then. The law required the Federal Reserve to hold gold equal to 40% of the value of the currency it issued, not a true gold standard, meaning 100% of the gold for the currency it issued. Now, this standard continued until 1933, when President Roosevelt suspended the gold standard as a part of his response to the Great Depression, which I'll kind of talk about why he did that later on. And at the end of World War II, the U.S. had about 75% of the world's monetary gold, so therefore the dollar was the only currency still backed directly by gold when that suspension ended. However, as the rebuild after World War II took place, the U.S. saw much of its gold reserves leaving and flowing out to other countries, specifically to help rebuild, but also in the form of demanding imports from those countries, German goods, British goods, French goods, etc. And in trade, which I'll talk about also, it required gold to be transferred between the countries with a gold standard. This caused major volatility in consumer pricing and limited U.S. exports. So in 1971, President Nixon, who was a Republican, if you remember, officially ended the convertibility of the U.S. dollar to gold, putting an end to the gold standard completely, and we've lived that way ever since. So let me tell you why the gold standard is really dumb. I have I think 7 points here. Now, the first reason is because of the limited money supply. With the gold standard, the amount of money in circulation is tied to the amount of gold a country has. This means that the money supply cannot be easily expanded or contracted to meet the needs of an economy. In a closed economy, under the gold standard, a country's monetary supply is determined by its stock of gold. To increase the money supply, the government must mine more gold. Therefore, economic growth is constrained by the gold supply. We could never have mined enough gold to meet the demand of the booms in the U.S. over the last 40 years, period. According to the World Gold Council, the annual mining of gold brings to the forefront 80 million troy ounces per year. This means that the gross world product is locked into that level of growth. It can't go higher than that. Had the world been on the gold standard, this amount would just accommodate $400 billion worth of growth. Just last year, the global world product grew by 4.4 trillion. We don't mine nearly enough gold to match that level of growth. So if the economy grows faster than the gold supply, it can lead to deflation, which is when prices of goods and services decrease. Now you might say, well, prices dropping is a good thing. Well, not necessarily. Deflation can be harmful to the economy because people may hold off on buying things because they think it will get cheaper later on. This can cause a decrease in demand for goods and services, which can lead to lower production and fewer jobs. Also, if people think prices are going to go down, they may delay spending their money, which makes the economy weaker. Additionally, deflation can make it harder for people and businesses to repay their debts because of the amount they owe stays the same even though the value of the money has gone up, meaning more demand for the money means more the money is costing more. So the other reason is limited flexibility. The gold standard ties the value of the country's currency to the price of gold. This means that a government cannot easily adjust the value of its currency to respond to changes in the economy. For example, if a country is experiencing high inflation like we are right now, a country can't simply devalue its currency by selling more of it on open exchange markets. This increases supply of the money, which lowers the cost of holding the money relative to your own currency, thus making the exports in that country more competitive. This lack of flexibility can make it harder for countries to respond to economic crises. Also, limited reserves. Number 3 here, limited reserves. The gold standard requires a country to hold a large amount of gold in reserve to back its currency. This can be expensive, and if a country does not have enough gold, it can lead to a run on that currency. If everyone tries to exchange their currency for gold at the same time, it can lead to a financial crisis. This also leads to wasting resources because we are now mining gold as fast as we can. Meaning we're just digging up the earth to find as much gold as we can. That's not good for the earth. Unlike what currency is printed on, which is various types of cloth, we use gold in things. We use gold in the stuff. A lot of the stuff I'm using right now has gold in it. Were we to convert to the gold standard, we would see an immediate skyrocket in demand of gold. And the reality is this would cause the price to jump by potentially tens of thousands of dollars per ounce. Currently, the demand is driven by demand for gold is driven by its usefulness in electronics and jewelry, and a little bit in investment as a hedge. The current price for an ounce of gold is about $2,000. Were we to jump to $20,000 due to massive demand, your phone would cost $600 more than it does now. The gold used in the electronics, medical devices, automotive devices, defense and aerospace would all be very much more expensive. It's also increasingly used in as a catalyst for many industrial processes. Oh yeah, and just standard jewelry. In that scenario, while we wait for the prices and wages to equalize because of this massive jump in demand, which could take years, the economy would legitimately collapse, worse than ever in history. Number 4, the gold standard limits international trade. With the gold standard, countries must exchange goods and services based on the value of gold. This means that the value of a country's currency is fixed, which can make it difficult to engage in international trade. For example, if a country has a strong economy and its currency is high demand, it can't simply print more to meet that demand. That's what the U.S. does. When people say they're printing money, the U.S. is meeting the demand of their currency. Furthermore, if a country bought more goods from other countries than it sold to them, it has to pay that difference in gold. This made banks have less money, the ones that are making the payments. And that meant that they, with less money to go around in the country they have. So when you're an import nation, you would have less money on the books to have in your own nation. Number 5, vulnerability to gold price fluctuations. On the gold standard, the price of gold can be volatile. It's been volatile in previous times, which can create instability in the gold standard economy. For example, if a large gold deposit is discovered in a country, it can lead to an increase in the supply of gold and a decrease in its value. Economics 101 there, folks. Supply and demand. When supply increases, prices drop. This can cause inflation and devalue the country's currency. Similarly, if there's a sudden surge in the demand for gold because of its usefulness, such as in a new hot gold-intensive product, it can create a shortage leading to deflation and financial instability. As you can see, this is something that causes major volatility because there's no usefulness to the dollar outside of just as a medium of exchange. It has no usefulness. Gold actually is useful. Number 6, it becomes difficult to respond to economic shocks. Under the gold standard, a country cannot easily respond to economic shocks such as recessions or natural disasters. Without the ability to print money, it can be difficult to inject the necessary capital into the economy to stimulate growth. This can lead to prolonged economic downturns and make it harder for people to find jobs and start businesses. You have a hurricane that hits Florida and the Carolinas or Alabama. Sorry, it can't get you money because we just need to mine the gold real quick before we can get it to you. That's not a responsive system. That is volatile and it'll cause absolute harm. And then finally, there's a potential for hoarding. The gold standard can create an incentive for individuals and countries to hoard the gold as a store of value. We actually see this in Bitcoin, people hoarding Bitcoin because they see it as a store of value. This can limit the amount of gold in circulation and restrict economic growth. It can also lead to an uneven distribution of wealth as those who can afford to buy more gold become more wealthy, while those countries and those people that struggle to get more gold have limited access to even their basic necessities. They can't borrow to buy food. And you know what? When you can't get basic necessities for your people, that's how wars start. So those are just some reasons real quick, and I'm sorry I talked real fast, but I had to get it all out, that the gold standard is really dumb, and I really am glad we're not on it, and I highly doubt we are ever going to be on it ever again.